Hey everybody, it's Birdie at My Favorite Quilt Store, and I'm going to go over the applique version of the kit, My First Quilt kit, okay? So, appliquing is fun. It's like my favorite part of quilting. So in the kit you were told to cut some 5.5-inch squares out of your centerpiece, and that's what this is. And so I sewed two together and then pressed them to one side, and then I sewed the two sides together, so I've got them, they're nesting right here. So, and when you're done with this, it should measure 10.5 inches. And that's important anytime you're doing your piecing, so make sure you've got your correct 1/4-inch foot on, or however you sew your 1/4-inch seams. So applique, like I said, is fun. And the other thing that you got in your little kit is a fusible backing. It's Steam a Seam 2, I believe. And so you trace out, and you can buy that in two ways. It comes off the roll, which is the stuff that you got in your kit, and then you can always buy, they sell you, like, I think it's 5 sheets that are like 8.5 by 11 in a packet, and that usually doesn't have the grid lines on this. You don't need the grid lines for this project, but if you're drawing your own pieces, sometimes those grid lines help you. And when you use this piece, this off the roll, there's one side that comes off really easy, and you can tell it's right there. So, and then you've got the sticky stuff here on the back. So when you cut that out, you want to trace your heart onto that piece of fusible web, and you want to mark on the side with the grid lines. The other side is blank, okay? And I did that because that's the side that falls off real easy. So you want to make sure, and even like I said, if you buy the packet that doesn't have the grid lines on it, you can easily, there's always one side that will peel away easier, and you want to trace from the other side. The other thing that I wanted to mention when you're doing applique, it doesn't apply to this. You'll wind up doing a reverse. So if you're doing like letters, you have to trace them backwards, because when you apply them, they'll come out the right way. But that's for more advanced quilting. So I've got this together, and now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fussy cut. I'm going to iron it onto my fabric. So first thing I've got to do is I want to review this beautiful fabric that we have, and I have decided that, you know, when you fussy cut, you wind up wasting fabric. Oh, it is on this side. So I think I'm going to go with, I want it to be a little close to the edge, so I think I'm going to be cutting something here. But remember, when you fuse, you have to fuse, when you do your fusing, you have all kinds of motifs in this piece that you can choose from. You're going to be fusing it to the back side of your fabric, and that's a big thing that you need to know from the very beginning. You always fuse on the wrong side of your fabric. So, and when I trace mine, you can see I've got my lines here and I use a pencil. People use different kind of pens, whatever you, and you do what you think is best, what you feel more comfortable with. So you trace your heart, and that's from the pattern that they gave you in the kit. And then keep this on there for now, and then you're going to come over here to the iron, because this is the section that I want to use. So I'm going to come over to the iron now, okay? I've got my iron set ready to go here. The other thing I wanted to mention about this, when you cut out your piece, you want to give it around, you want to cut out about 1/4 inch away from your fabric. I mean, away from the line here. And you do that because you don't want to waste, you want to waste at least, I shouldn't say waste, but you want to, after we iron it on and we're going to cut on this line, you'll make sure that the edges are tightly fused as well. So just give it, like I said, anywhere from, just a little bit, and it doesn't have to be a full 1/4 inch, but that way you don't waste as much of your other fabric, because I'm going to fussy cut this, meaning I might come over here and go in when we cut it. But so I'm going to go ahead and lift off that back piece, and this one, like I said, comes off real easy. I'm going to place my heart where I want it, and I think that's good. And you're going to fuse it here, and then once we cut it out, then we fuse it to your 10.5-inch square that you created. But for this first part, they recommend using a dry iron, no steam. So, and you don't want to iron, you want to press. Okay, so I'm going to just press and I hold it for 3 or 4 seconds, and then I press again. And you notice that I'm not ironing. I'm lifting my iron up and then I'm placing it down. And I think that's good. I'm just going to give it now that I know that it's all fused. Okay, that's good for now. You need to let it cool down all the way, so we're going to wait a few minutes. In your kit, you got this little pair of scissors, and I love these scissors. They're not for paper, they're for fabric only, so remember that, because the paper will dull them faster. The other thing that I like when I cut this stuff out, these are scissors from Karen K. Buckley. She does a lot of, she's a great quilter. She does a lot of applique work. And we sell these scissors, and they come in 3 different sizes. There's a real tiny set, and then like a medium set, and then these big ones. What I like is that they're big, they're comfortable to use, but I don't know if it's going to show up. The blades on these scissors are very narrowly, it's serrated, which means they did this to try and help the applique pieces from fraying. And depending on the stitch that you use, that can make a big difference. But I like to use these, and so that's what I'm going to cut my heart out with. But I just want you to know I absolutely love these scissors because they're super sharp and they're a great little size, especially for traveling. They're great to have if you do any of that. So I'm going to come over here, and I want to make sure I stay in the camera. Okay, so I'm going to come here, and now that's what I'm going to cut right on the line. And you're just going to cut your entire heart out that you just finished appliquing. Okay, so we've got that done, and here's your heart, and look what we wound up with. So the next thing you do, and like I said, you need to, before you cut that, you need to let it cool down. You don't want it warm or anything. So here's our 10.5-inch square, and I'll bend this and see how it just by that slight bend, and you could tell because you could feel that fusible. It's like a filmy color, a little stick. It feels, and this just peels right off. And again, this is still tacky enough that if I'm going to line up my tip with my seam line down there, and same with the V in the heart. But I just want to show you. I don't have it where I want it, but I wanted to show you. I could pick that up, and it's going to stay. And the reason that I like that, and the reason that you would probably learn to like it, is that if you're doing an applique project where you have more than one piece that you're appliquing and you want to put it on your design wall, this, like I said, is repositionable even before you fuse it. So I want to try and get an idea. I want to make sure that you want to try and center it as best you can. Let's see. Okay, I like that. Okay, now the best thing to use is an applique. It's a pressing sheet, and it's like Teflon. It's you can, and you do this to protect your iron, just in case there's any of that fusible that you don't want to get anything dirty on your iron. So I put that down, and again I'm just going to take my hot iron. And I hold it a little bit longer than I do when I do the first fusible to the back side of the fabric, because I want this to be completely stuck. So I'm gonna do it a little bit longer, because you want to make sure you cover every single edge, because that's what you're going to be sewing when we do the applique part and sewing the heart to the fabric. And now that I know that it's stuck and I have this pressing mat, I can do this just to make sure. And again, you can remove that. We also sell these pressing sheets as well. And the trick on these, if you buy one, is you don't want to ever fold it to get a crease in there. You just want to roll it up and keep it stored that way. Either put a rubber band, or we have this little gadget that it's a circle thing, and it just, now you're done. So while it's cooling down, I want to show you the back side so you can see exactly how I sewed these two blocks together, then these two, and then I sewed down here, and I had my seams going in the opposite direction, so they nested really good. But for this, even if you messed up a little bit, if you don't get it exactly perfect, it's going to be hidden by your applique. So now we're ready to go to the machine and stitch around this heart. We're here at the sewing machine, and we're going to applique. That means we're going to stitch around the entire heart. We have some options. Some people do a satin stitch, which is like you wind up with like a solid looking line. I don't like that as much. My favorite is the buttonhole stitch, or they also call it the blanket stitch. So I've chosen that stitch. It's this one right here, the one in red. And I've just checked it to make sure that I like it. And I'm going to start right here. And I'm using black thread. Now you can use, if you wanted to use an orange, because there's more orange in this, you can. But I chose black because black is the background of this fabric, and there's black in here. And your orange would show up here, and I just think it would be nicer done in black. So I am going to start. You could use a zigzag stitch. You know, these are all these decorative stitches that come with mine, you know, and I'm like I said, a regular zigzag stitch, you know, is just it goes back and forth. And your goal is to sew right at the edge of your fabric. So we're going to go real slow. And I'm going to switch feet because I don't like this one. I want to put a foot on my machine that I can see better with. So I am going to use what they call an open toe foot. Not completely necessary, but you can see already that I can see exactly where my needle is going to be going. And that's key with your applique. So I'm going to start right in that top V of the heart. I'm going to put my needle down just a little bit. And I got my presser foot down. And I've already checked about how wide. This tells you that my stitch length is 2.5, and I'm okay with that. This is not a complicated piece, and my width is also at 2.5. Play with your machine, see what stitches you have that you like. You know, like I said, if you want to do a simple zigzag, you can do that. The other thing that some people do, they call it a raw edge applique, and they just do a straight stitch, and you sew on the inside of your quilt all the way around. But once you see this stitch, I mean, like I said, this is my favorite stitch to use for doing fusible applique. So it's going to do several in the same place, and then we're going to start moving. So you can see it does one stitch forward, and then it goes over to the left to catch the fabric, and then back, and then another stitch forward. And I'm right on the edge of my applique piece. And sometimes I'll even lift my presser foot up to help it, you know, to get through the curves the way I like it. And we're just going to go all the way around the entire heart. And you can see when I pivot, the idea is to get that stitch that goes over perpendicular to the stitch that you're doing out here. So you don't want it to come off at an angle. I mean, if it does, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm having trouble seeing. Let me see. I can get better light with that, does that? Okay. So we're just going to keep going all the way around the heart. Should have pivoted there, but this machine, I'm so used to my machine at home. And see how I'm not going super fast, I'm just taking my time. The more you applique, the better you'll get at this. You just have to remember the pattern of your stitches. And what I mean by that is it's going to do a stitch forward, a stitch to the left, and then back, and then a stitch forward. And I always just keep that in my mind as I'm doing this, because there's another stitch where you can get 2 stitches forward and then a kick over. But I think this is a good stitch for a beginner. Pivot again. And we're just going to take our time And the reason you don't want to go you don't want to sew right on that edge. If you kept sewing right on that edge, you're going to cause your fabric to fray. Even though it's fused, it will do that. So we're just going to go nice and slow. And that would be the same with your zigzag stitch. Your goal is, you don't want to have your stitches running outside this. You want to stay as much on this fabric as you can, other than stitching on this side of it to catch all the raw edges. You can see it better when we're sewing in the white spaces. Oh, and look what that did. I think it caused my machine to skip a stitch. It did, so I'm going to stop here, which sometimes happens. It's just the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and clip that out where it didn't catch it. What happened is my stitch over here didn't catch. So I'm going to pull some of this out. I'm going to pull it to the back. You can see see what I'm talking about, how it didn't stick over there. So, and I'm just going to leave these edges like that. I'm not going to cut them off. I'll do that later. I'm going to come back to my piece, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to reset my stitch here because I can get it to start from the beginning again. So, and I know what my pattern is. I'm going to go where my last, and see how I'm overlapping? I already got a stitch there. I'm going to overlap it. That's because I don't want to lose my pattern. So it'll now do some stitches down in the middle yeah, and then we'll go forward. And by sewing over that, I kind of secured that loose thread. It will not pop through now, if that makes sense. Now, I'm doing this because I want my stuff to look as close to perfect as possible. But as a beginner, you don't have to be as picky. So don't get encouraged, don't get discouraged if you're like off to the side too much or whatever. But you always have the option, if you don't like it, to unsew it or rip it out and do it again. It's just, and if you want to practice on something first before you feel confident enough to do this, go ahead and do that. But there's always a learning process for every new thing you learn as far as quilting goes. You just try it. And like I said, applique is not for everybody, but it's my favorite. I love applique. And I'm not pushing the fabric. I'm just letting the machine do all the work. It pulls it through. And now we're going to get to this tip. Okay, and I'm not at the very tip, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to back out of that a little bit. And I'm going to, okay, so that's where I'm at now. Now I have to pivot. And the idea when you have a point like this is to make your next, turn it, and you want your stitch to go straight. Okay, so there we are. And now I pivot again. We're over halfway done now. Like I said, every now and again I'm guiding it with my left hand over here. You can't really tell that, but that's kind of what I do when I have a long, easy curve going. And the more you applique, the better you'll understand that. And you get a good idea of how I'm not trying to hit. I don't want to sew on that with my outside, my straight stitch, so to speak. I want to be right on the edge of it. Again, your goal is to get that kick over stitch to be perpendicular, and it's not always going to be, but and if you mess up, it's really no big deal. There's no such thing as a perfect quilt. That's my belief. Okay, we're right in the center of the heart there, and that's exactly where we want it to be. And I want that stitch. In fact, I might even move it just a tiny little bit. Doesn't matter. Okay, we're good right there. And it's going to do another kick over. And now I'm done. So I pull my needle, make sure that stitch takes, and I pull my thread out. And then I go to the back side, and I want to pull that thread from the top to the back here, and sometimes, and we got it. It's that easy. And then what I like to do, and everybody does this different, but I actually tie my threads off because I don't want any loose threads poking back through or letting some of that stuff come undone. And then I just clip it, and then we have this mess over here where we had to stop and start again. And just because they're there, I'm going to do the same thing with these threads. I'm going to tie these off. And clip that. Oh, I should have, and we're okay, because when I started over, my machine does 3 stitches in a row, and it kind of, that puts like a knot in it. Same with this one. So, and that gives you an idea. You have this little, and it kind of like, it like highlights your applique work. And like I said, you don't have to be perfect. I know there's a couple places where I felt like I stitched on the edge a little bit too close. It might have been right here, and you could see these different colors. That's it doesn't matter. So, and you could tell you did a good job because now you can see that you have a heart on the back of your fabric as well. So that's it.